Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of our The Crown series. Over this series, we are diving into the stories of kings in the Old Testament and what we can learn from them. Last week, we learned about how it's important to seek repentance and redemption instead of revenge from King David. But this week, we're going to dive into the idea of crisis. How do we handle crisis? How do we process crisis? How do we deal with it well? But more importantly, what is crisis? And I think it's important for you guys to understand that crisis is not just some life-changing cataclysmic, I don't even know the word, event. An event where everything is different, everything is changed. There's nothing that can be done. It's just catastrophic. There we go. That's the word. And then we are in crisis. But there are so many different ways that we can find ourselves in crisis, guys. We find ourselves in crisis when we have reached a situation where we are overwhelmed. And we feel like we are drowning, or we don't know what to do, or we don't know what the right next step is, and we are just at a loss. And I don't know about you guys, but I can tend to struggle in those moments of crisis. I experienced one this year, and it's kind of ridiculous when I look at it now, but it took us 6 months to get our marriage license this year. And a marriage license is it's a legal paper that says that you are officially married, and it's something that's very important and that you need it in order to move forward with changing your name and all these legal things. And so we sent in our marriage certificate after we got married, Mike and I. And they told us that it would take a little while for our marriage license to be sent back, and so we waited 3 months and it never showed up. It never showed up, and so then I started sending emails, and then I started looking for phone numbers, and I was trying to figure out who I was supposed to call, who I was supposed to get a hold of, to figure out what happened to our marriage certificate. Where was our marriage license? And finally, I got a hold of somebody, and they told me that our marriage license, our marriage certificate, was not in the system. It was not in the system. There was no record of it, and because of that, our marriage, our wedding day, our ceremony was void, and we were going to have to do it all again and have a different wedding day. And I lost it, guys. I lost it, and I was crying and I was sobbing and I didn't know what to do, and I was so upset. And I remember Mike came in and I was like, what are we going to do? We're not even legally married. Like, this is crazy. We're gonna have a new wedding date. We're gonna have to do a courthouse wedding. This is not what I wanted. This is terrible. And so Mike asked if he could try and make some phone calls, if he could see what he could do. And I kind of laughed at him and told him, what is the point? This is just a terrible situation. But Mike made some phone calls. And it turns out Mike got the right phone number, because it turns out I had been talking to the wrong clerk office. It turns out I had been talking to the wrong person, but somehow Mike found the right person, and that our marriage certificate wasn't void. It was in their system. It simply had just gotten lost in the mail, and they had to remail it. But you see, I never would have known that because I had reached the end of my rope. I thought there was no other options, and I felt so lost in it. And it wasn't until somebody else came in to help. It wasn't until I asked for help, and I didn't even really ask, that things changed. That I was able to move forward, that I was able to actually get answers. And that's because, guys, when we are in crisis, we can get to the end of our rope. We can get to a point where we buckle down. We buckle down and we think that there's nothing that can be done. We buckle down and we think, this is it. This is the situation. I am just in this terrible spot. There's no solution. We think that we can't ask for help because if we can't solve it, no one can solve it. But that's not true. That's not true. And it's when we get to those points, we need to figure out how to handle crisis better so that we can figure out how to get through crisis and grow from it. And so I want us to look at the King Hezekiah in the Old Testament. And I'm going to jump through 2 books in the Bible where he's talked about today, which is 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. But what you need to know about King Hezekiah is that he was a good king. He was a good king, and that he decided to rededicate the temples to God once he became king. He cleaned them out. He purified them. He wanted to glorify God, and things were going well. He was doing a good job. But then all of a sudden, his kingdom was surrounded by the Assyrians. And the Assyrians had come to dethrone Hezekiah. The Syrians had come to kill them. The Syrians had come to destroy them and take away their way of life. And Hezekiah was in crisis because he didn't have any other options. He didn't have enough men to fight him. He didn't know what to do. But the thing is in Hezekiah's story, he shows us how to handle crisis well. And the first and foremost is that he seeks counsel. Because I don't know about you guys, I do this. I think when I am in crisis, when I am at a point where I am not capable of solving something, there's this pride that comes over me, and I don't want to ask for help. But asking for help is the most important and best thing we can do. Even more important than that, it's who we ask for help from. Because I think more often than not, we can go into crisis and we can find ourselves looking to people who don't know how to help or can't help or don't understand. But how do we be wise? How do we have wisdom in who we ask for help? And we see this in what Hezekiah does. Because you see, Hezekiah in this story, he can go to his comrades, he can go to his friends, who, though those, words escaping me, warriors, they were warriors. He can go to his warriors and ask them what to do, and they're going to tell him to fight. But instead, Hezekiah went to the wise men of his community, men who had been far more experienced than him, men who had experienced far more crisis, to ask them what was the right thing to do, what was the wise thing to do. And these men pointed Hezekiah back to God. These men told Hezekiah to trust in God. And I think that's so important what Hezekiah did. He understood that he needed to go to somebody with more wisdom than him to better understand how he might get out of a situation, how he can better handle it. And so I want you to be asking yourself, guys, where are you seeking counsel when you are in crisis? When your grades are slipping and failing, who are you going to for help? When you're making choices that you know might not be healthy, when you're crossing boundaries that aren't good, when you're cheating on tests, when you're stealing things, whatever it might be. You found yourself in a situation where you know you should not be in, where you know things need to change and you're not exactly sure how to change it, or you're more afraid of what happens if you'll get caught doing what you're doing. Who do you go to for counsel? Who do you go for wisdom and help? And it's important to know what kind of questions to ask, guys. Because you see, I've learned this over the years, what it looks like to ask for the right kind of counsel, to seek the right kind of people to speak into your life. And I learned this by first figuring out how to do taxes. When I first started doing my own taxes, like an adult, I went to my dad. I went to my dad because he had far more experience than me on what it would look like to do your own taxes. I didn't go to my friends who were doing their own taxes for the first time as well. I went to my dad and he helped me. He helped me figure things out and he helped me learn. But after that first year, I even learned there was things my dad didn't know. So I started going to an accountant. And I know this isn't a simple way to explain it, guys, but I think it's so important when we are in crisis to ask ourselves, who are the right people to talk to? Who is somebody who can speak into my life? Who is somebody that can help me find the right person to talk to in my moment of crisis? And those people, guys, could be your parents. They could be your small group leaders, your pastors, your teachers. And even if the people, the first adults you go to aren't the ones with the answers, they can help you find the person that does have the answers. Whether or not it's because you're dealing with mental health issues, maybe you need to go to a parent to talk about it so that they can get you to the right therapist. Maybe you're struggling with school, so you need to talk to an adult who can help you get in touch with a tutor who can actually help you in this crisis. It's important for us to seek counsel, but seek good counsel. You don't want to just seek people that are going to tell you everything's okay, but you're going to want to seek people that will help you figure out how to get out of it, how to do better. So that's the first thing. The second is to refuse to bargain. And what is it that we have to refuse to bargain? Our character. Because you see, when we find ourselves in moments of crisis, we can start to bargain who we are just to make things a little bit better. And I want to read what goes down in 2 Kings chapter 18. Because you see, the Assyrians have surrounded the Jewish people. They are going to die. The Jewish people know that they are in the thick of it. They are in crisis. And Hezekiah is telling them to trust in the Lord and to believe that God will show up. But the Assyrians choose to taunt them. And it's in verses 28 through 30. And here's what it says. Then the commander stood and called out in Hebrew, "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria." You see, the Assyrians were taunting the Jewish people. They were taunting them, telling them that they are done for. They can't recover. This is the end of them. It will never get better. They cannot save themselves. There's nothing that can be done. But I like how they respond. And we see it in verse 36, and here's what it says. But the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, "Do not answer him." And what I love about that is, they didn't give any time for that. They didn't give in to the taunts of the Assyrians. They didn't respond to the fact that the Assyrians said they were done for. They didn't listen to the lies that they couldn't get through this. And I think so often in our life, we can get stuck in this lie when we find ourselves in crisis, when we find ourselves making choices we shouldn't make, when we find ourselves in situations where we're worried what people will think of us, where we're worried that there's consequence, that we think it's the end of it. It's going to be too great. The consequence is going to be too much. It's going to be too shameful. It's going to be too embarrassing. It's going to be too hard. I might as well just give up. Or I might as well compromise who I am. And it's when we find ourselves in this point of crisis that we start to compromise who we are. And first it starts off with maybe we give a little way in our character. Maybe our grades are slipping and we feel in crisis, so we choose to cheat on that one test, just that one time, to make things better. Maybe our relationship with our boyfriend or girlfriend is getting a little bit rocky, so maybe we'll cross that boundary one time just to make it better. Maybe our friends are not hanging out with us as much because they're doing things that we don't feel comfortable doing. Maybe we'll try it one time just to make things better. We slowly compromise who we are. We slowly give up boundaries we normally wouldn't, because we start to believe in this lie that there's no other way out. There's no other way out of this conflict than to compromise who we are, our character. But that's not what we should do. Instead, we should hold tight and remain silent and not respond to those lies, not give in to those voices in our head telling us that we need to give up our integrity. We need to make one small bad choice to make things all right again. Because in the end, guys, that one small choice turns into 2, 3, 4, 5, and eventually we start to build unhealthy habits and defense mechanisms that don't solve anything and only get us in more and more crisis. Because you see, it's when we're in crisis that our character is challenged, guys. And it's how we hold to our character that truly matters. And so what we've learned from Hezekiah so far is that when we are in crisis, we need to seek counsel, good counsel. When we are in crisis, we cannot bargain with our character. But finally, when we are in crisis, we need to call ourselves to courage. And Hezekiah does this. Hezekiah calls the men to courage. And I love how he does it. It's in 2 Chronicles 32, verses 7 through 8. And here's what it says. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater power with us than with him. With him is only the arm of the flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gained confidence from Hezekiah and the king of Judah. You guys, the final thing we need to learn from Hezekiah is that we have to invite God into our struggles. We have to remember that he wants to be there with us, that he wants to help us out. And we need to remember that we are far greater than the struggles we are in, and that God is so much better than the struggles we are in, and he can help us through it. That doesn't mean he wipes our crises away. That doesn't mean he all of a sudden make things better, but he can give us the strength. He can give us the courage to make the hard decisions, to do things better, to have the hard conversations we're scared to have, to ask for help when we're too prideful to. We need to turn to God and ask him to be capable where we are not, to show up where we feel like we can't. And here's what I want to challenge you guys in today. What kind of step do you need to take in the crises you face next? What kind of steps do you need to take in the crisis you might be in now? Maybe you need to seek wiser counsel. Maybe you need to pull your pastor or another adult aside today and ask for wisdom. Maybe you need to make a commitment to not bargain with your character anymore. Maybe you need a new boundary in your relationship. Maybe you need to make an agreement with yourself about what you listen to or what you read. Maybe for you, you aren't in crisis, but you need to call someone else and encourage them and remind them that they can get through it. Maybe you can help them. Maybe you need to send a text or a DM to somebody and remind them that God is with them, or somehow you need to remind yourself that God is with you. Because you guys, following God is not a guarantee that our life is going to be easy. And more often than not, sometimes our life can feel harder because of the standards we have to hold ourselves to, but those standards matter because they're what's healthy. They're what's good. And when we're in crisis, we're more likely to stoop to levels we normally wouldn't. We're more likely to make choices we normally wouldn't agree to make. But how do we instead head into crisis and handle things a little bit better? How do we instead head into crisis and seek wiser counsel? How do we instead head into crisis and refuse to compromise our character? How do we instead head into crisis and remember who God is and lean on Him? And so that is what I want to challenge you in today. I want you to head into small groups and talk about where in the crisis that you are finding yourself in right now, do you need to be doing a little bit better? Where in the crisis you're finding yourself in right now can you be seeking better counsel? Or can you be not bargaining with your character? Or where can you be remembering God and leaning on Him? And if you're not in crisis right now, what are things you've done in the past that you think you can change and handle a little bit better? How can we be the kind of people that follows Hezekiah's example, where we seek wise counsel, we don't bargain with our character, and we lean on God when we are in crisis? Guys, it's not easy. I hope you know it doesn't mean you have to be perfect and handle things perfectly. But crisis is not the end of everything. We will always get out of it. But instead of getting out of it with more damage done, how instead do we get out of it from learning, asking for help, and clinging to God instead? So how can you head into crisis following Hezekiah's example? All right, guys, you can stick around for announcements, and then we'll have small groups. Hey guys, I just have a couple announcements for you. First and foremost, next Sunday we have our Sandblast Rally, and what that means is students are invited to go out, get lunch, bring it back, come hang out, and then we are going to learn our team cheer. We're going to prepare some cheer supplies, and then we're going to play some games that we're also going to play at Sandblast. So this is a great way for us to get prepared, to show up at camp and be ready to compete. But also, if you are not going to Sandblast, you are still welcome to come to this event, have fun with us, and play some games. Also, talking about Sandblast, I want you to know that Sandblast registration closes tonight at midnight. So if you want to go, make sure you register tonight by going to studentimpactcamp.com. I also want to let you guys know that we have our Bible studies on Wednesday nights from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in the South Lake lobby. So if you would like to come, read the Bible, and learn a little bit, then join us there. All right, guys, those are the announcements for this week. You can head to small group.